When you're using embossing folders, there's so many different techniques you can use, and in this video I'm going to show you 5 really simple and quick techniques that you can be doing to create embossed Christmas cards. And stay tuned towards the end because I have got a complete mistake that I somehow managed to fix too. So this is the new Creative Craft Products Christmas Pick and Mix collection, and I'm going to be focusing on the 2 3D embossing folders. For the first card, I used the Christmas tree and I spritzed with water my cardstock first, laid it onto a rubber mat and ran it through. The water helps the fibres stretch a bit. As you can see, I've got a lovely deep impression. Then I used a brayer with a pigment ink in a light green colour and brayed all over the raised surface of this. Now I noticed there's a bit of pink coming off my brayer, but that's fine. I went with it. Then I ran it through again but turned the design round and repeated the process with a brown ink so that I've now got my entire piece of cardstock covered, and it looks like there's dimension with branches in the background and some in the foreground. Finished off with a splattering of paint for some snow effect, some gems for berries, and one of the sentiments from the new Pick and Mix Christmas collection. So that's the first embossed card. Now the second one is using mirror card and the stocking embossing folder, putting that inside. Now I love embossed mirror cards anyway, but this just takes it to another level. So once you've embossed this, and bear in mind you could emboss on the front or the back as such, so you get a deboss or an emboss for this technique. I then took a solvent ink, so this is a StazOn ink and a piece of kitchen towel, and I brushed ink all over the surface, making sure to really press it into some of the detail on the emboss. I buffed a lot of that away, leaving a bit in the detail, and then went over it again just to darken the effect, and this time I sort of tapped around the outside to give it a tarnished and sort of aged metal look. I love this grungy effect, and it leaves the ink sitting in the detail and it really picks it out there. So again, finishing this one up with one of the sentiments embossed in gold from the collection there, wishing you peace and joy, and that finished off that card really quickly as well. Now back to the Christmas tree embossing folder, and I'm using my alcohol inks onto an alcohol ink cardstock. I've got greens, but I'm also adding some black because this technique looks better if you do it on a darker background. So just mixing the colours and using my blower tool there to scatter them around, keeping them to the bottom left hand corner, which is where my embossing is going to be. So once I was happy with the alcohol ink and I allowed it all to dry, I then put it into my embossing folder and ran it through in the same way as I would with any other cardstock. Just be aware that the ink does need to be thoroughly dry for the next stage. So as we can see, when we open that up, we've already got a really nice emboss, but I sanded back the top layer of colour with a fine grit sander here. This is a craft sander, but you can use sandpaper, a nail file, anything like that, buffing it off with some kitchen towel as you go, because you will get some coloured powder come away. Once you finish that, you've almost got this skeleton leaf looking effect there. And with a sentiment and a piece of twine, I've got a lovely finished, very contemporary and modern card. For the fourth card, I wanted to get a parchment craft look, so I used some vellum and I folded it in half into my embossing folder. I used 2 layers because my vellum is quite thin and I wanted to get a deep emboss in this without it cracking. So I ran it through first of all with a thin rubber mat because I was being very careful about that cracking, but that wasn't quite enough. So I then put in a thicker rubber mat, ran it through once more, but I still found that this really wasn't quite enough pressure. So this time, the third time, I ran it through with a piece of cardstock on top as well, and this gave me a much better effect. I also had the option of using the front or the back of the 2 sheets that I embossed. Putting this on black cardstock makes it really stand out, so I did just that with a simple white sentiment to finish that off, and I think it looks elegant, very simple but beautiful. Now for the last technique. Now this is the one that I went wrong. I embossed and I decided to add embossing ink to the reverse of my embossed cardstock here. I went in with my ink pad rather than the brayer. I was getting frustrated with not putting enough ink on at a time. But when it came to putting some shimmery, sparkly embossing powder over there, hoping that the fern leaves would be left as negative, I found that the majority of the cardstock was actually covering, so I wasn't getting the leaves. Nevertheless, I thought I would melt the powder and see how it looked, and as I thought, it actually had got powder and ink into all the debossed areas of the leaves, so they didn't show up in the way that I thought they would. So instead I decided to have a go at this same technique but on the reverse, so on the embossed side, and that turned out so much better. So you can see there it's a slighter detail, less shimmer, but it looks beautiful. Again, just a simple sentiment finishes this off absolutely perfectly and lets the background shine through. So there's 5 different embossing techniques that you can try at home using your 3D embossing folders. Some of these will also work with 2D embossing folders too. You'll find all the details for this collection down in the description below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.